Elizabeth I is believed to have been one of the greatest queens that ever ruled over England. However, she gained the nickname the Virgin Queen, as it was said that she never in fact had a lover, and she never married, and instead decided to stay 100% devoted to her country. She was greatly concerned that if she married, then she would be forced to share her power with a man, as at the time many across England were concerned about the fact they had a queen and not a king. But Elizabeth throughout her life would be linked to many different men, and there were a number who were considered to have been a possible husband for her. But there was one man in particular that she was incredibly close with, Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. But many historians over the years have considered whether Elizabeth lived up to her reputation as the Virgin Queen, or whether she in fact had a secret child or marriage that was covered up for centuries. Around November 1560, it was noted that the Queen's looks were similar of that of a pregnant woman, and then a secret dispatch said that the Queen was expecting a child with Robert Dudley. However, further accounts said that in early 1561 that the Queen was laid up in bed with an illness which caused her body to swell, and the court debated whether there had been a secret proposal and betrothal between the Queen and the Earl of Leicester, Dudley. But what was this mysterious illness that the Queen had come down with? If we consider her symptoms, that she was tired and needed bed rest, and also her body swelled, then it's possible that she may have had symptoms of pregnancy. As trimesters and weeks passed, the Queen could have suffered more from this, and as mentioned, months before, it was noted that she looked pregnant. Other conditions such as ovarian cancer could have caused the stomach to swell, but to onlookers and ambassadors, they believed that the Queen was in fact pregnant. This would have been a shock, especially if the Queen was unmarried, as her heir would have been illegitimate and conceived out of marriage, thus barring it from the throne. On New Year's Eve, 1560, Throckmorton, the English ambassador in Paris, wrote to Cecil asking what to do if the Queen would lose herself in marriage, and he even wrote to the pair asking if the rumours were true. Cecil, Elizabeth's adviser, then replied with, "I advise you not to meddle with the matters of this court, otherwise than ye may be well advised from hence. What her Majesty will determine to do only God, I think, knoweth, and in her his will be fulfilled." Cecil, in this, did not deny the reports and rumours that were false, but he shot down anyone that questioned whether the Queen was pregnant or married. It was reported in January of 1561 that Sir Henry Sidney, who was married to Robert Dudley's sister Mary, said that the marriage between the Queen and Dudley was in everyone's mouth at court. It was said that, "If she marry Lord Robert without his Majesty's sanction, your Majesty has but to give a hint to your subjects, and she will lose the throne." With this, the Spanish ambassador was questioning the popularity of Robert Dudley, and the Spanish believed that as a woman she was acting way above her station. But it would be sensible to believe that if Robert Dudley and Elizabeth I had married in secret, that they would have had a child, or would have certainly engaged in relations. There were many rumours about the Queen's relationship with Dudley, and the Queen was violently attracted to him, and the same could be said for Dudley. They rode together and danced together, and had quiet moments together, and there were many rumours that they were lovers, and one woman, old Mother Dow of Brentwood, was even placed in prison for telling her neighbours that "my Lord Robert hath given her Majesty a red petticoat," which was a euphemism for taking her virginity. There isn't any real evidence to suggest that the pair were intimate, but even on her deathbed, Elizabeth would state that, though she loved him dearly, nothing unseemly had ever passed between them. One document, the Dictionary of National Biography, claimed, "It is herein recorded that on the 21st of January 1560–61, Queen Elizabeth was secretly married to Robert Dudley in the house of Lord Pembroke. The following day, the Queen was at York Place, and there were no public engagements or meetings. However, some historians have claimed that there was a child that was born to Elizabeth but was given away." On the day following this, Francis Bacon was born to Sir Nicholas and Lady Anne Bacon at York House, or York Place, which was also known as Whitehall, the Queen's palace, some claim that Francis, this son, was actually the Queen's son, and was then adopted by the Bacons. Francis Bacon eventually rose to the position of Attorney General and the Lord Chancellor of England following Elizabeth's death, and by giving him away to a powerful family, if he was the son of Elizabeth I, she would have regularly seen him, and he did have a role in her era, as he would become a legal advisor to the Queen. In the following month, the Spanish king would visit Elizabeth, and he said that he wanted to see her married, and it was said, "She would make me her ghostly father, and I should hear her confession. It came to this, that she was no angel, that she had not resolved to marry Lord Robert of anyone. She thought her own people would like to see her married to an Englishman." But many others, including Dudley's own brother-in-law, would state that the Queen and Lord Robert were lovers, but they intended honest marriage. And a bishop replied that, "Some say she is a mother already, but this I do not believe." So it was common gossip at the time that the Queen may have had a child, and if she was lovers with Dudley, then it's possible that a child could have been conceived. Another account would state that, whatever were the Queen's relations with Dudley before his wife's death, they became closer after. It was reported she was formally betrothed to him, and that she was a mother already. But amongst all the classes in England and around Europe, there was a lot of gossip that the Virgin Queen had children, by Dudley, and these rumours would persist throughout her whole reign. There were accounts of people being sent to prison for commenting on these rumours. For example, Robert Brooks of Devizes in 1562 was imprisoned for publishing this slander, and in 1570 a gentleman named Marsham of Norwich had his ears cut off for saying that "My Lord Leicester has 2 children by the Queen." In 1572 it was made an offence by Parliament to speak of any successor or heir to the crown of England than the Queen, and one historian stated, "I myself heard some oftentimes say that the word was inserted into the Act of Purpose by Leicester, that it might one day obtrude upon the English some bastard son of his for the Queen's natural issue." But what is even more strange is that the rumours persisted about the last Tudor monarch even centuries after her death. It was said that during the reign of Queen Victoria, the Queen was staying at Wilton House. The Earl of Pembroke told her that in the monument room was a document which formed written evidence that in 1560 Elizabeth I married the Earl of Leicester. The marriage was performed in a secret oath of absolute secrecy. At the time of the marriage, the Queen was pregnant by Lord Leicester. The French and Spanish ambassadors reported this, and the death of Amy Robert, Dudley's first wife, to their courts. They also told the Queen that if this was confirmed by her marriage to Leicester, France and Spain would jointly invade England to remove the Protestant Queen and replace her with a Catholic monarch. Queen Victoria then ordered the document to be fetched, and she put it on the fire, saying, "One must not interfere with history." The relationship between Robert Dudley and Elizabeth I was a complex one, and it's clear that the pair were in love, and that Elizabeth held a close place in her heart for Robert Dudley. There must have been some origin for these rumours, as they spread around Europe, but what is interesting is the comments regarding a possible pregnancy. If the Queen would have had a child, this could have been the Tudor heir that the country wanted. But ultimately, the Queen would die upholding what she claimed was a pure life, and she maintained she was the Virgin Queen. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.